we would be irresponsible as leaders. Now, when this regime is on its knees, we have to put our foot on the neck. We have to squeeze and get a deal that has evaded every American president up until now.
There is no good deal with the Ayatollahs. You know that even while they're talking to you, they're screaming death to America, death to Israel. So you realize that they're not negotiating in good faith.
Shalom and welcome to another episode of Israel Undiplomatic. I'm Mark Regev, and I'm here as per usual with my co-host Ruthie Blum, and we are speaking to you today on February the 11th, on the day that Trump is meeting Netanyahu at the White House. I think it's their seventh meeting since since Trump returned to office for his second term. And I think no foreign leader has had as much Trump time, presidential time, since this administration started its second term. Ruthie, what do you think is going on?
First of all, I just want to make one correction. It's actually their eighth meeting. 7 in the United States and 1 when President Trump came to Israel. It's unprecedented. You're absolutely right. Now, that meeting, everybody has been, for the last few days, analyzing what are they going to talk about and why did he fly there suddenly when he was scheduled to be there next week anyway. Before we get to that discussion, let's hear what President Trump had to say to Larry Kudlow on Fox News Business yesterday.
Do you think a deal with Iran with this current regime would ever really stick?
I don't know. I don't know. I know one thing. They want to make a deal. They wouldn't talk to anybody else, but they're talking to me. But, it's a good question. A lot of people say no. And I would say that I'd rather make a deal. It's got to be a good deal. No nuclear weapons, no missiles, no this, no that, all the different things that you want. But some people worry that they've been very dishonest with us over the years, right? Very dishonest. Obama and Biden, what they did in terms of creating a monster with Iran was terrible. That Iran nuclear deal was one of the dumbest deals I've ever seen.
Ruthie, the meeting is today, but this gives me hope. And I know what we said last week, you're against any deal. But if there is going to be a deal, and I don't have the same ideological objection that you have, but if there is going to be a deal, at least you can take comfort from the fact that the president has said in the hours leading up to the meeting that it'll be a deal that includes the nuclear issue. The Iranians have to dismantle their program. And the president said in his own voice also the missile issue. That means the ballistic missiles that can hit and target Israel. That both those elements have to be in the deal. Does this give you a higher degree of confidence that if there is a deal, it's not the end of the world?
No, it does not. But let's put it this way. He also said no nuclear uranium enrichment or no nuclear weapons, no ballistic missiles, and no this and that. And what he meant by this and that is no funding terrorism around the world and perhaps no executing Iranian demonstrators. Now, do I think that he has good intentions? Yes. But here's what I'd like to do. Let's do something different this time because everyone's speculating. Nobody, even people who love President Trump and people who hate him, nobody can figure out what goes on in his brain. And so everybody's trying to interpret is this just a fake out and he's just preparing? After all, he's gotten all these aircraft carriers and, there's preparation to launch an attack if, as he said, if there's no deal. Now, Netanyahu, everyone's trying to interpret why is Netanyahu rushing there? Is there a rift between them? Whatever. So let's do
some. For a moment, I wanted to. I'm happy to go forward according to what you've suggested, but I just want to say I disagree with your premise. You can never know what's totally in anyone's mind. I can't know what's in your mind, and you can't know what's in my mind, even though we know each other quite well. But I think there is something that we understand about Trump's behavior and about the way he sees the world. He believes in power politics. He believes in strategic interests. He believes in looking after the United States of America and the people, the citizens of the United States of America. He likes countries that can defend themselves and that stand up for themselves. And that's one of the reasons he likes Israel. Not just because the family and growing up in New York and his Jewish daughter and so forth. I think Trump, and we've said it on this program before, Trump is not Obama. He's not one of these, liberal doves, war is always the last resort and I don't want to, risk armed conflict. He's not afraid to use military force. On the other hand, and we've said it, he's not a neocon either. He's not a nation builder. He doesn't want to go into wars that are protracted. He doesn't want to go into a Vietnam or an Afghanistan or an Iraq. He wants to use military power. 3 Ds. He wants his wars to be decisive, destructive, and done with, right? And that is Trump. And then you have to say, okay, that's what we saw in Venezuela. And now he's flexing all these muscles. He's moved his military assets, both military, army, and navy, into the region, poised to strike. And he says he wants a deal. And if the Iranians agree, there'll be a deal.
The 2026 JNS International Policy Summit will take place April 15 to 17 at the Waldorf Astoria in Jerusalem. Register today at jns-summit.org and use the coupon code JNSTV. That is JNSTV, one word, to receive 20% off all tickets. I look forward to seeing you in Jerusalem. First of all, it's not the Iranians, it's the Islamic Republic. It's the Ayatollahs. We have to make a distinction between the Iranian people who have been gunned down in the tens of thousands because they want regime change. Okay, now, also, just one other point. This will be for another discussion about the abuse of the term neocon and nation building. That's for another time. We don't need to go into that now. What I will say is this. Any deal with the Islamic Republic, with those Ayatollahs who are today, they are having now celebrations in honor of the 47th anniversary of the revolution that saw the Ayatollah Khomeini return from France, where he was in exile for 14 years, and the Shah, the ouster of the Shah. Now, how are they celebrating? By, for example, burning American and Israeli flags, screaming, showing off ballistic missiles, some of which have the photos, actual photos of U.S. generals. And they are saying death to America, death to Israel. Now, this is while they are also saying to President Trump, yes, we're going to meet again to make a deal. Now, obviously, they want a deal because any deal will be in their favor, whatever it is. Why will a deal be in their favor? A, they won't stick to it. B, they could wait out President Trump's term, which is another 3 years. He has another 3 years to go. C, they are fiercely building ballistic missiles with greater precision, better speed, greater distance, etc. in the meantime. And so that's why they're saying, you know what, we'll be willing to discuss percentages of uranium enrichment. And from that moment on, Trump should have just said, forget it. But we know that Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner, who, by the way, already met with Prime Minister Netanyahu, and they all get along really well, etc. But I think they're under really stupid illusions about Islam, radical Islam, and the regime in Tehran. Now, what I'd like to do, and I'm going to hand it over to you, we talked about how we could do a kind of role playing, kind of simulation about what actually went on behind closed doors between Netanyahu and Trump today, because whatever emerges, whatever they may, their public statements, we can't count on those to really give us an indication of whether there is going to be a military strike or not. And one more point is that everyone in Israel seems to believe that one thing Netanyahu is going to say to President Trump is, if you do make any deals, not just please make sure there's ballistic missiles in those deals, because that's an existential threat to Israel, but please do not tie Israel's hand. If you do make a deal, do not promise the Ayatollahs that that deal includes preventing Israel from taking action on its own.
Can I argue, before we move forward, I have to argue again, you called the ballistic missile threat an existential threat, okay? And I think that's overstating the mark. The nuclear question is definitely an existential threat. I think Iranian and other radical Arab leaders have called Israel a one-bomb country because we're geographically very small. For our American audience, we're smaller than New Jersey. We're about the size of Delaware, something like that. It's a small country, very focused in the greater Tel Aviv area. And it's true, with a couple of nuclear bombs, you could probably bring the end to Israel. And so that's an existential threat. I agree 100%. But you said the ballistic missile program. So the ballistic missile program can hurt us badly. We saw in the 12-day war, we had, I think close to 30 Israeli civilians were killed by bombs, ballistic missiles that blew up, residential areas and so forth. It's not easy. But to call that an existential threat is to cheapen the word existential. It's like terrorism. It's like we've been through these things before. It's a threat. It's an unacceptable threat. We have to eliminate the threat, but it's not an existential threat.
All right, I take your point. However, it all depends on how accurate and how far those missiles can go. We also know that there were posters and maps put up in Tehran with pictures of central Tel Aviv, the greater Tel Aviv area, and in Hebrew, a threat that, the bombs are coming for you, etc. Now, as I said, let's sort of do some role playing, okay? Because you being the diplomat and me being the non-diplomat, I'd like to say, now I know that, by the way, Prime Minister Netanyahu is also very diplomatic. As tough as he is, he certainly doesn't want to go up against Trump, and there's been no need to, but except in cases like the relations with Turkey and Qatar, there are a lot of worrisome things, and that has to do with Gaza. Before he left, before he got on the airplane to go to Washington, he did say, that what he's going to talk about includes Gaza and other, the Board of Peace, regional issues, but that Iran is really, we know Iran's the head of the octopus. So here's what I'm going to say. Imagine the following conversation where Netanyahu delicately and with great respect, okay, not to say, will say to him, President, Mr. President, with all due respect, there is no good deal with the Ayatollahs. They won't uphold a deal. And as you pointed out, that Obama and Biden, they did a lot of damage, and Obama in particular. And the reason is not because the deal was bad by itself, but because their interest is regional and global hegemony. And you know that, and that's through their proxies, etc. You know that even while they're talking to you, they're screaming death to America, death to Israel. So you realize that they're not negotiating in good faith, and you can't trust them. You yourself said so when you ripped up the deal. And nobody likes war. But sometimes, as we saw in World War II, as we saw after October 7th, sometimes there is absolutely no choice. And after all, you did promise the Iranian people that help is on the way, and they don't think that means a deal.
So first of all, I don't think Netanyahu will say that last sentence. I think that's too much for an Israeli prime minister to say to an American president. So let's leave that part out of it. I don't think that's realistic. On the other part, I think Trump would probably answer something like this. He'd say, we have a military option. I've moved those assets into the region. I'm locked and loaded, as they'd say in the infantry. Yeah, I'm ready to go. And the Iranians know I'm ready to go. But Bibi, he'd say to his friend, right? We have the military option, but the military option, you know how these things start. You never know how they turn out. You don't ever know exactly what's going to happen. The Iranians are under immense pressure today. They've just gone through all this internal trouble from their perspective. Their regime is surviving at the moment on very, very thin ice, right? Their economy is falling apart. They are weak. They are vulnerable. We have leverage that we didn't have this time last year, and definitely we didn't have this time 3 years ago. I'm now using the military leverage combined with the internal and the economic leverage and all that. We're going to get a deal now. Now, I have no illusions, Trump will tell Netanyahu, about the nature of this regime. I know that they lie and they cheat. But if we can get a deal that dismantles their nuclear program and deals with their ballistic program and the other issues, right, which I don't know how much, I presume we'll go into great detail with Netanyahu, yeah? This is a unique responsibility because both you, Bibi, and I know that the military option is there, but it's not a clean finish all one-off and it's all over, right? We know that a military option has all sorts of variables and we can never be sure. You start something and you're never sure which way it goes and what price you're going to pay. If it's possible to get a deal because we've got a gun pointed at their temple, yes, let's do it, Bibi. That's what the world is about. These are our enemies. I've got no illusions. They are weak now. They are uniquely vulnerable. This is the chance to close a deal that's good for America, that's good for you, Bibi, good for Israel. This is the time. It's never going to be a better chance to get a good deal.
But, Mr. President, as you know, being a famous deal maker, that the time to make a deal with people is not when they're at their weak point. That's the point at which they should be begging to stay alive, basically, not to make a deal. They are at their weak point precisely. That is why they're trying to pull the wool over your eyes and saying, okay, we're ready to make a deal. Because let's face it, if it was even possible, let's say, they'll give up their nukes, they'll give up their ballistic missile program, they'll give up their terrorism, they'll stop killing protesters, they won't be who they are. They won't be the greatest state sponsor of terrorism. They won't be the jihadists they are. They won't be the Shiite crazies they are. So it's like, I used to say, if my grandmother had wheels, she would have been a bus. It's impossible. That does not happen. And the same thing we have to say about Gaza. Anything you say, if they agree to those things, they would no longer be who they are. So we know that's impossible. That's one thing. Second of all, sometimes, yes, it is true. You don't know where war will take you. That is true. But sometimes you have no choice. After October 7th, how many people told us in Israel and abroad. But what about the day after? We don't know. This has consequences. We don't know. We don't know what's going to be. You have to make plans. No. First and foremost, you have to kill your enemy. And you have to do it not only because of morals and responsibilities and your own interests. Morally, you have to do it. You really do. And in the case of Gaza, we had 250 hostages taken. We had 1,200 people slaughtered in Israel. At that moment, saying, well, maybe we should make a deal. No. And the same thing goes for Iran. At this point, you cannot allow the Islamic Republic to exist anymore, and you need the Iranian people are trying to overthrow the regime, and military action will help them. Some from out, some from within, and from without.
Ruthie, before I answer as Trump, I'll answer as Mark, and saying Bibi the Israeli Prime Minister would never give such a monologue to an American president. You want to keep your points short, you want to make them effective, but I don't think Trump likes to be talked to in a sort of a monologue ongoing way. Make your point and move on. right? That's what I think the way you should talk to the US president, especially this US president. And now I will respond as Trump. Bibi, you talk about morals. You talk about a regime that is evil and needs to end. Look, after 9/11, America had every right to go into Afghanistan and kick ass. George W. Bush had every right to do what he did, but he wasn't smart, Bibi. It might have been morally justified, but he wasn't smart. We were stuck in Afghanistan for 20 years. Who knew when we went in and we finished things so quickly that we'd be stuck in that quicksand for 20 years, Bibi? And what about Iraq, Bibi? Was that a good move? Were we stuck there not for years? Once again, we had every moral right to do it, Bibi. But America was saying, I'm telling you, the American people will go to war if they feel there's no choice. The American people will protect their country, will protect their national interests. We will fight our enemies. But if it's possible to get a deal with the Iranians, and I want to tell you something. If the Iranians don't agree to this deal that I've put on the table, if they don't agree to dismantle their nuclear program, if they don't agree to move on the ballistic missile issue, the American people will support me if I have to pull the trigger. They'll support it because they'll know that I've gone through every available diplomatic path beforehand. But without that, to make the mistake that George W. did, I'm not going to make that mistake, Bibi.
Excuse me, you mentioned Iraq?
Excuse me, sir. It's the president you're speaking to.
Okay. You mentioned Iraq. Israel said all along not to go to Iraq. It was Iran. Israel said all along that Iraq was the wrong target. And all those people saying, oh, the Iraq war was due to Israel. No, 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 no. Iran, Israel said all along, Iran, Iran, Iran. And by the way, I've been saying that for decades. People made fun of me, said I was a fearmonger and all that. That's one thing. Number two, we're not expecting American troops on the ground in Iran. That isn't what this whole thing is about. And Americans saw the great success of the 12-day war, the Midnight Hammer, your part in it with the B-2 bombers. It was a great success, but it wasn't finished. And that's one thing. And the other thing is that when you say, okay, if they won't make a deal, then we have legitimacy. I'm saying, okay, first of all, you have legitimacy anyway. And by the way, Mark, when you said to me, Prime Minister Netanyahu wouldn't speak to Trump that way. So it's lucky that I'm not the person going there and talking to President
Correct.
I can talk to you, Mark, that way. So that's a crucial point. But another crucial point is that Israelis, ironically, Israelis are not unified on most issues. But one thing all Israelis grasp is that the threat from Iran is still very potent and that Israelis consider it legitimate for Israelis to take action. The only question always has been is, do we have the capabilities? Do we have enough interceptors for when Iran retaliates or when it initiates or preempts? But one thing is certain. Many experts in Israel believe that if it takes too long or if the United States does not want to do this, that Israel may have no choice but to preempt and attack the ballistic missile sites, if not also the regime figures. And we know that with all the celebrations going on right now in the Islamic Republic, guess who's not there? Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, who is in his bunker.
Can I answer you, Prime Minister, and say the following? You said quite correctly that my Midnight Hammer operation was a great success. But to be frank, it was a great success because it was a surgical strike with a specific goal, and that is to destroy specific Iranian nuclear targets. But specific Iranian nuclear installations were eliminated, obliterated in Midnight Hammer. The job was done and it was over in a matter of hours. When you're talking about regime change and bringing down a government, it's, Bibi, you've been in war, it's a much more wide goal. It's a much more difficult goal. Now, I think if we want this conversation to be productive, I've told you already that my preference is for a deal A good deal, not a bad deal. I'm not going to make the same mistakes Obama did. I'm not going to make the same mistakes Biden did. I want a deal that will be a good deal for the United States, and I believe a good deal for Israel too. Tell me, Bibi, what you need for that to be a good deal, because you can talk to me till tomorrow about you don't like this deal, but there's going to be a deal if the Iranians agree. Now, I spoke this morning to Jared and to Steve. They were with you yesterday. They said you agree. You said no lifting of sanctions until the Iranians actually implement. In other words, nothing to do with signing the deal. Lifting of sanctions will only happen when they've actually started to destroy their remaining nuclear infrastructure. I agree with that. We'll make it linked. In other words, for smiling and signing, they get nothing. It'll be a phased process based on implementation. Secondly, you would say you want to reserve the right to act independently to protect. I accept that. I accept that principle, and we'll say that publicly. Third point, ballistic missiles, part of the deal. It has to be part of the deal. And once again, sanctions limitation, lifting the sanctions will only be in according to implementation. Is there anything else that you need that I can put in this deal? But if there's going to be a deal, the only one who can prevent this deal from happening is the Iranians. If they're stupid, if they're not willing to negotiate seriously, if they're not willing to agree to an agreement, then there'll be war. And then I will know, and the American people will know, that there was no choice.
All right, that's an excellent point. I will say this. You're absolutely right. If Netanyahu right now, that absolutely it's key to say that you can't tie Israel's hand in the event that this doesn't work out. Second of all, I wasn't saying that you need to attack for regime change. That's for the Iranian people to do. I was saying you need to attack the ballistic missile sites, the uranium enrichment sites, the heads of the Revolutionary Guards and the Basij and the Ayatollahs. To target, you do targeted strikes. It isn't America's job to institute regime change in another country. No way. That's absolutely not what we believe or what's possible or what Americans, and it's certainly not what America first means. What it means is you enable the Iranian people to get out from under the people gunning them down, and in order for them to be emboldened and to do it themselves. That's the point of this. In any case, again, good luck. I don't believe that there is such a thing as a good faith deal with the Iranians and with the Ayatollahs, not with the Iranians. I think that, again, they're not going to change their stripes. And if they did, they wouldn't be an Islamist regime. So the only question is whether or how much coordination the White House and Jerusalem, how much coordination will we have? How much notice do you need and do we need and who's going to strike first? Do we have to wait to be attacked by Iran in order to act? These are things that we need to know, and we need to iron them out fast because things are heating up, and it doesn't look like the Ayatollahs have any intention of agreeing to any of those things. And in the event that they do, they won't mean it.
So my people have been speaking to your people. My generals have been speaking to your generals, and I particularly like your chief of staff. He looks like a tough general to me. Of what we do if there's a war, and we will have excellent coordination. Excellent coordination. We work well together, Bibi. Your team and my team, my generals and your generals, we work together very well. And if there is going to be a war, I expect that to be even better than before. It'll be a beautiful war. Is that too much over the top?
Big, beautiful armada and a big, beautiful.
But
Or-
Bibi, all right, that's the option if the Iranians decide they don't want a deal. If the Iranians are stupid, and they could be stupid. But if they go for a deal, and it'll be only because I'm holding my pistol to their head. If they do agree to a deal, Bibi, we'll give it a chance. If we see they're breaking the deal, and I'll say so publicly, if they break the deal, First of all the sanctions will be on straight away, and we will use military force if we need to. And definitely Israel will have every right to protect its interests. But Bibi, we've got to give this a chance. We would be irresponsible as leaders now, when this regime is on its knees, when this regime is uniquely weak, not to try to get through pressure diplomacy. I'm under no illusions. These guys are wackos. These guys, But if they're weak now, we have to put our foot on the neck. We have to squeeze and get a deal that has evaded every American president up until now in their dealings with Iran, every Iranian president since Jimmy Carter. I can do the deal. This is the time. I want you to be part of it. I want you to help me. Let's get a deal that's a good deal for us all.
But if you remove sanctions, then their weakness will become their strength. You're going to infuse money. They'll have more money with which to build up all their nuclear plants again and full speed ahead on their ballistic missiles. And you say,
no, but
well,
the minute they do that, their money stops.
Yes, but look at past behavior. They wouldn't let inspectors in any of the sites. How do we
That's
monitor
because
that?
Obama and Biden were weak leaders. They know. They start playing games. Trump will use his military force. If they break a commitment they made to me, look, they respect me. They know that what Trump says, he will follow through. They know that I'm not afraid to pull the trigger when I need to. They know that they will face the wrath of violent hell if they play games. With people like the Iranians, you can smile, but you've got to carry a very, very strong club. And that's the way to deal with these people.
Again, with people like the Islamists, okay? The Iranian people are not Islamists for the most part. They're not. And by the way, here's another problem. We know now that China and Russia, but particularly China, has been supplying Iran with all the technology that enables China to keep its people in the dark in terms of the internet and communications with the outside world. And that largely helped the Ayatollahs black out the internet as much as possible. Even when Elon Musk provided Starlink, it was very sketchy. They have a way of really keeping the people in the literal dark.
Bibi, that's the difference between you and me. You're a regional power. I'm a global power. I have to worry about the Chinese. I have to worry about the Russians. I want to take the Iranians out of the fire, to neutralize them, to make sure that they're not a threat, so I can focus on America's real threats. I'm not denying that the Iranians are a threat, but the Iranians are a middle-sized power. The Chinese and the Russians, they've got nukes. They're serious contenders. I want to take Iran out of this. And precisely because I'm worried about China and I'm worried about Russia, that's the reason I need to do this deal, Bibi.
But doesn't that contradict your vow to the Iranian people that help is on the way? What is the meaning of that?
I said
Doesn't
before
matter.
that there's no way the
Fine,
Israeli prime minister is going to raise
Doesn't
that issue
matter,
that
okay?
way.
I'm not actually the Israeli prime minister.
I know that.
Okay, so, but what does
Thank
that
goodness.
mean? Yeah, thank goodness. What did that mean? What does that mean that help is on the way? Do you know how many thousands of Iranians actually got killed after you said that and they were emboldened to continue protesting in the streets? What did it mean? What did you mean by help is on the way? Not a deal.
I support those people. I want to see them rise up and throw out this terrible, despicable, evil, corrupt, inefficient terrorist regime. I want all that to happen, but that has to come from the Iranian people. I can't do it for them. Now, if we can get this deal, which will weaken the Iranian regime, which will tie its hands, maybe that will also help the regime change in the long term. At least there's a possibility of that. Just as targeted strikes against the Basij, against the Revolutionary Guards, against infrastructure projects, against the Supreme Leader, no one knows how that turns out either. It's not like there's a golden path and there's a path full of, terrible risks, right? Both paths are risky. I'm the president. I was elected to protect the people of the United States. I think this deal limits the risks and offers gains. Once again, in any negotiation, Bibi, you've done a lot of political negotiations, Bibi. I've done business negotiations. When the person you're negotiating is weak, you exploit that and you get the best deal that is possible.
Okay, well, listen, Mark, we're coming to the end of our podcast.
No, we're no longer role-playing. We're back to being Martha and Ruth.
We're back to being Mark and Ruthie because you seem to think that I did a terrible job of playing Netanyahu.
How was I playing Trump, though?
Pretty good. Although a little more articulate than Trump tends to be. I'm not sure how Netanyahu would take if Netanyahu saw me and he'd say, I don't think you did a good job. I wouldn't talk to President Trump that way. But I will say one thing. Part of this had to do with our interpretation of what is actually, what is being said without being said, or what the meaning, we don't know what went on behind closed doors, regardless of public statements. And now being back to Mark and Ruthie, as I know many fellow Israelis, I'm actually really hoping for a military strike on the Islamic Republic. However, whether coordinated with the United States or preempted by Israel or not preempted, but I think it has to happen. And that will also have an effect on all the rest of the region that is still really dangerous. Gaza, Syria, what's going on with Turkey, all of those, the Houthis in Yemen. I think this is crucial.
So I'll give you my analysis and not my preference. I think it's ultimately all dependent now on the crazy Iranian regime. Because if they make the compromises that Trump needs, there'll be a deal, and Israel will have to live with that. And hopefully it'll, because of Netanyahu's visit, and it'll be a deal with less problems than otherwise. But my impression of everything we've seen from the president is he wants a deal, and if he thinks he can get a deal, it'll be a good deal and not what he would call a terrible, bad, stupid Obama deal, yeah? I think that's where we're going. It's not clear to me, now I'm giving my opinion, that's clear that that's the American position. It's not clear to me at all, and you could be right. Iran might be incapable of playing a serious game of negotiations, though they could say, we can make these terrible, difficult compromises now because in 3 years, this man is no longer in the White House. And then there could be a deal. But once again, the ball, I believe, is firmly in the Iranian court.
Okay, well, I think that's a shame that the ball is in the Iranian court. I think it should be in Israel's court. But that's for another discussion. And until next week, who knows? Again, each episode we end by saying that by next week, who knows what's going to be happening here in terms of whether we're going to be in bomb shelters, not be in bomb shelters, etc.
So, Ruthie, we will wait and see, but it was a pleasure talking to you as the Israeli Prime Minister.
Well, it was great to be able to talk to President Trump as well.
Until next time.